Jimmy Richards jumped off there, was hoping to have a run between Bond and Gagan, but it's Bondi leading this time. Muppet looking for the sneaky way up the inside, but not getting it. Bit of a touch there as Jimmy Richards jumped Pete off. Look at Pete.
So guys, this is my buddy George Sheweiry, and he has been the long-time owner and caretaker of this amazing historic car. And by my reckoning, you would have bought this car in about 1978, yeah?
77.
77?
Yeah.
Wow, okay. So tell us how you got into racing and how this... So you were 21 when you bought it.
Yeah.
Which is insane, isn't it?
Yeah.
That amazes me. And so tell us your story about how you got into racing and how you came to own this car.
Yeah, well, okay, so as a kid, I was hard into World War II fighters. I was nuts on them, you know, and I actually had 52 of the model aircraft that you put together, the Rebel and the that sort of deal.
Yep, that's right.
And the next door neighbour, Brian Boyle, who lived at the back of our property, he says to me one day, he says, oh, my uncle's going to race the new race car out at Bukakohe, do you want to come out? You know, and I was, I don't know. Well, you might as well. You're not doing anything. Well, yeah, okay. So off I go to Bukakohe with him, you know, and we get out there, and I remember we were in this big Coca-Cola tent because he worked for Coca-Cola. So
this was Alan Boyle?
Alan Boyle, yes, that's right, and with his Viva GT, you know, and I never seen one sort of before as well. And here's this guy beside us with this crazy haircut, you know, and they fired up his car, and I'm like, wow, what is that? And it was Alan Moffat, the Coke Mustang. Right. We shared the tent, you know.
Of course.
And then at the end of the day, I think it was either that or at a practice. I can't really remember. I just remember they took me for a ride in the car around the track, like a proper ride.
In what car?
In the Viva.
Wow.
Yeah. Now you got to remember, this is in the days, and my dad, you know, and he had Fairmonts and things like that, and cars are forgetting from A to B, son, you know, and chug, 50 miles an hour, and I get in this thing, and it's like, you know, and I hop out of that car, and I get back home, and 52 models go in a box under the bed, and I'm into cars.
Yes, indeed,
So then, of course, I go to leave school and everything, and the HO's won Bathurst and that, and we're a Ford family, you know, and so that said I got to get an HO, so I saved as hard as I could, and I was looking around.
And when you say HO, Falcon GTHO.
Falcon GTHO, yeah. And so I came across an XT GT that I really didn't know a lot about cars. But here this thing was, and a lot in K Road, it's sort of where the old testing station was, and it was beautiful. So I ended up buying that, you know, and then I kept looking for an HO, and then finally the one behind me, actually, the Robbie Francevic car came up for sale. And it was in at Monaco Motors, and I managed to buy it. You know, I got it on hire purchase and bought the thing. You know, and
so tell us about this. So this is it looks like an XY, but it's actually an XW.
It's an XW, So it was a 70 XW GT, and it had an HO engine in it, and it had the big 36-gallon fuel tank. The special I think they were like. They used them on the XA, the bigger stub axle, front axle, and the different type kidney brakes on it. And So
this had been raced by Alan Moffat,
Robbie Francevic.
By Robbie Francevic.
And he cleaned up actually in it as well,
So this was raced by Robbie Francevic in the Castrol GTX series?
No, it was prior to that. I can't remember what it was called, And he did really well in it, And of course, so it had the Cleveland in it, so it's virtually a replica of a Phase 2 GTH. And anyway, so I came across it sitting in Monaco Motors, and so I bought the car, and I always liked the XYs, so I converted it to an XY, and I repainted. It was dark iridescent blue, so I repainted it the orange because the Vermilion Fire. I love the colour, and repainted it that, and that was my Well, actually, I raced the XT GT in one race when I first got that.
Yep.
And then from then on, I started racing this, you know.
Wow,
And
yeah.
so as a kid as well, as an apprentice boy, I used to go to Macmillan Ford a fair bit and John Andrews getting parts.
Yeah, yeah.
And they had this magazine that they put out. It was a 2-page or a 3-page thing.
Yeah.
And it had all the latest motorsport stuff of all the Fords around New Zealand that were doing well. You know?
Yeah.
And of course, I'd been to the track by then and seen all these. I really loved the sports sedans. You know?
Yeah.
And here, every time in this blooming little, what was it called? Performance News it was.
Right.
And here's this picture of this Sidchrome Mustang with this Gurney Westlake engine. I'm like, Gurney Westlake engine, what's that? I don't know, but I love it, you know, with all the Webers and everything on it, and etc. And of course, I used to look at that and I drooled over it and thought, oh, what a bit. And I thought, oh, I'd love to. And I thought, yeah, right. Never. So one day at where I was working at Rankin McManus Electrical, the boss says, you know, can you go and get some elements from Utron? And they were up in the back in Eden Terrace. And so I've been there before and every time I'd go past, I would go past Jeff Sutherland's panel beating shop, and he's famous for he rolled E49 into the pits, landed on its blooming roof of the pits.
Right, he pancaked the roof.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and so I'd have a look because there's usually something to see, you know. So this particular day, I'm driving past, looking, oh, yeah, there's an XE1 and this and that, and and the Sidchrome Mustang, the Sidchrome Mustang, you know. And I'm like, it's supposed to be an Aussie, so I get out of the van and go and see, Jeff, and he's, g'day George. I said, what? That's the Sidchrome. What's it doing back here? And it was all white, actually. It was in primer, you know. And he goes, they've sent it back to be sold over here. I said, well, who's... He says, Jerry Clayton. He's the one you got to see. So I straightened the van straight down to Clayton's, you know. And I said to Jerry, because how much? And he said, it's $9,500, which was half a house back then.
Yes, exactly.
You know.
Sounds cheap now, but man, there's a ton of dosh back then.
Yeah. So I had a Falcon that I'd built up from. So I'd been racing for a little bit by then, and I'd buy stuff when it was cheap. I'd come across this 4V Cleveland engine matched up to a 4-speed heifer gearbox, you know, and which was no good because they had a crawler first gear, and that was all sitting aside in that. But I did have other Cleveland stuff, and then I had some wheels off another car that I bought to get some bits off, and I thought to myself, you know what, I got enough stuff that I could make a replica GT sort of thing, you know, and flick it off because it's easier to sell stuff in one whole lot than it is piece by piece. Yes. And I used to call in to see the Daisies all the time because they were running that Cologne Capri, you know. Holidays,
yes.
Yeah, and they had this X-Reps car, XA Falcon, with the engine and gearbox out of it, you know. And I said, what's the story there? And, well, it's an X-Reps car. Yeah, we got to sell it or something or other. And I think it was $1,200, you know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I bought that off them and brought it home, and I got the local painter to paint it white, just enamel, you know, just slops white, you know. And then I with a spray can, I went around, I masked out all the black that the XA GTs had going around the guards, sprayed all that up, put the 2 scoops in the hood that they had, and put the GT badges on it, dropped in the Cleveland and the 4-speed Zephyr gearbox, you know, and put those steel wheels that I had on. It actually looked quite good, you know, as a replica, you know, and it was just finished and I was ready to sell that, you know, and I think I had 6.5 on it, trying to sell it for 6.5, you know. And so I go and see Jerry, and I see, and he's like, it's this and that, and he actually owned the car. Jim never owned the car.
That's right.
Yeah. And when he went to Australia, I think to help, Jerry took over the ownership of the car.
I see.
And and then so basically he was selling it, you know, and the price was 9.5, and I'm like, I want to buy it, you know. I've got a grand deposit, you know, but I got to sell this, and he's no, it's okay. That's fine. Yeah. And like I gotta take my hat off to Jerry. He really bent over backwards to help me get into the car.
Yeah. So he could see how keen you were, and he wanted to make it happen.
Yeah. So I said, look, I need 3 weeks to see if I can sell this car. So I put it on the Herald at the time, was you know, the only thing, and it didn't bloody sell. You know, I'm starting to panic. You know, and so I called him to see him. I'm like, Jerry, the car isn't sold. What is it? You know, so I explained to him what is. He says, just bring it in, just bring it in.
Yep.
And so I brought it in, and he says, yeah, I'll give you your 6.5 off the car, and I'd get the rest of the money by then to give to him, you know. And that was it,
Wow.
So I'm like, you can imagine the car that I always dreamed, and I'm now the owner of it with this bloody Gurney Westlake engine thing and all the rest of it, you know. So I get a trailer off a mate, and I go and pick it up from Clayton's, you know. Actually, no, it was still at the painters. It was still at Jeff Sutherland's, And I said to him, I see Jeff's tidying up the car and that. I said, what I want to have is it repainted back to the Richards colours, you know, because it looked, and he said, no, we can do that, you know. So that's what they did, you know. And
but you had your own signage on, though, didn't you?
Yeah, my dad owned Beach Road, half owned Beach Road Services with Grant Stembridge, and he sponsored me the race fuel and the oil and spark plugs and that. Not a lot, you know, but it helped. And so I had Beach Road Motor Centre along the side of it, and I ran it for a while like that, and for a couple of seasons, I think, and everybody kept coming up to me and saying, oh, is this the Sidchrome Mustang? I'd say, no, it's mine. Stuff off, you know. And so in the end, Moffat's Falcon had come out that with the Federation. Man, and that paint job, the black with all the that was off of Cologne, and I'm like, and so I thought, that's it. So we stripped it all down and painted it those colours.
Right.
And the rules had changed slightly then. I took the rear wing off and I put a big wing on the back. And I took the scoop off here and put, I had the mould for a Falcon Cobra scoop, so I put that on as well.
That's the reverse facing one.
The reverse facing one,
that's right.
And then ran it like that. Didn't really do anything to it. Now you got to remember, I'm an electrician. I didn't know anything about cars. I had to learn it all because I didn't have any mates that were mechanics or anything like that, and I didn't want to ask anyway. I'm one of those guys, I just roll my sleeve up. So I had to learn about building engines, painting, gearboxes, limited slip divs, you know, Detroit lockers and all the rest of that. And it was a long, slow learning process, and I broke a few engines doing it. But of course, I was doing it myself, so it cost me nothing to fix them, just the bugger all parts, you know. But I learned, you know, and away we went. So
isn't that amazing?
So when I went and picked the car up and I brought it back home on the trailer and my brother, he was only 12 or something rather, and I just had to drive this thing, you know, and and so I said,
so where was this? At your
this is from Hillsborough, the home in Hillsborough,
just suburbia.
Yep. So I said to him, right, hop in the car. So he hops in, holding onto the cage because there's only one seat. So I fire it up, you know, and off we go down the drive and get out onto the hill. Lived in Stamford Park Road, and out of our drive you went sort of up over the hill and down to Melrose Road. And so now we're out down there, and it's like, whoa, this thing's got some snot. We get down to the bottom to the shops, and there's no one there, so straight around and off and along Melrose Road, and then it turns around and went all the way along up to Hillsborough Road. And so I nail it down there, and it's just like, whoa. And of course the thing's got no exhaust, you know, they're just straight out, you know, and it's rowdy as hell. Get to the end, and of course I'm not going to do a 3-point turn this. I just hooked first, now, you know, just round she went. And then we go to come back the other way, and all the people had come out of the houses and they're all lining the street. And it's like, oh, an audience, you know, it's fast forward, I'm shifting gear. And we get back home and get up the drive and we hop out and we get out of the car, and I'm going to Clive, I'm going, holy hell, and then I realised I can't hear myself what I'm saying, you know, because my ears are ringing, you know. I said, and I'm yelling, can you hear anything? He's going, no. Next thing, about 6 of the neighbours come, my mates, you know, come up. You haven't bought the Sidchrome Mustang? What an awesome thing that was.
Isn't it amazing? Because like cars like this, they're also individual, and they kind of had their own following, you know. So I mean, Jim Richards, you know, had become quite a big name by that stage. This was the car that helped him to progress his career in Australia. But the cars themselves are just as fascinating and just as followed as the drivers.
Oh, for sure, Well, and of course, because Jim raced this, and he was my hero. And because he raced the Phase 3 as well, you know. And of course, as a kid at 14 years old, once I got into it, my old man had a big $16mm camera. It didn't have sound in that, and he you could buy the colour reels, and it was expensive as hell.
Yeah.
He let me take it to Pookie as a 14-year-old. I'd never used it before, and I filmed I actually put it on Facebook.
Yeah,
it's quite
I've seen that. That's
quite a neat
we'll
deal.
try a bit on here because it's very cool. When you bought this car, this was a complete turnkey car, wasn't it? Wasn't a rolling.
No, it was ready to go and all the rest of it.
So it still had the motor, it still had the Gurney Westlake heads and everything.
Okay. What I didn't know was there was 2 engines.
Oh yeah.
There was a Webbed one, which was a mechanical cam, flat tappet cam. And there was a roller cam injected engine. They pulled that out. That was the number 1 engine. They pulled it out and put it into the Falcon. Because the engine that Murray supplied needed to be. It was brand new and everything, but we won't get into that. Anyway, so Jim put it in that, and they put the spare engine. I didn't know any of that.
I see.
I mean, it went. Compared to the HA, it was like light years there. I was happy as anyway, But really, the whole car needed to be pulled apart and all sorts done to it because it was real tired by the time it got back. But I didn't know. I just, electrician, and so came with 60 tyres, and I pretty much used the tyres that it came with.
60 tyres.
I mean, if I had brand new tyres at any stage, it probably would have gone way better. Because the guys I was racing against, like old Gladys and his Charger, he had a big business and he had big dollars. And he was doing it right. He was doing one car. I had my money spread over all these other cars, and it didn't really matter because I didn't really have the ego. I just liked being out there and being up the front if I could. So
wow, that's a pretty cool thing. And so when this car raced in New Zealand, and like you say, it would have been tired because by 1977, 78, it'd been racing for 4 seasons. But these cars did a lot of racing. And so he'd do, when he went to Australia in 1975, Sports Sedan racing was a big, big thing over there already. In 76, they had the new Sports Sedan Championship, which I think he contested.
He won the $100,000 Marlboro Championship.
He did.
$100,000 back then. It was a fortune.
And so this car clocked up a lot of miles. And then, of course, at the end of the year, he'd bring the car back home to New Zealand to run a full tour around New Zealand. So she was a pretty well used car. So when this car was built in New Zealand, it had these beautiful I believe they're ROH, aren't they, wheels?
No. Murray had them made and he had them cast in Australia at some aviation crowd because of magnesium.
These are magnesium?
These aren't now. Okay, magnesium has a problem when it gets older, it gets brittle and cracks.
It does,
So he'd already had some cast up in aluminium, those real ones, and they'd never been finished. So I got them finished. So I ran this here with the... I had the magnesium 15 by 15s on the rear, that's right.
Got it.
And ran it like that. But when it came to rebuild it and to run it, I'm like, So he'd had these ones and they were sitting at the guy out in, where was it out? Not Ramarama, somewhere out that way. And so I got him to finish them. And there was this one as well, which was an aluminium one. That's all I had off it. And this one on this side is still one of the magnesium ones. And I checked it all out and it was actually all okay. So the trouble with magnesium, see how dull it's gone?
Yes, exactly.
But polish up, it comes out better than the
It does, I remember always Bob Jane's cars because he always had, I think he had someone full-time probably polishing his wheels because Bob Jane's magnesium wheels are always amazing looking. But of course, in New Zealand, this car probably ran, 12 or 14-inch wide rear wheels, but the Australian Sports Sedan regs required 10-inch wide wheels, didn't they?
So when he first went over there, he smoked them. He just smoked them and they all went, oh, well, no, you've got to conform. You've got to run to the 10s. And they all thought he'd be slow. But of course, he was running an old runner.
That's right.
He put on the 10s and smoked them again.
Exactly, And he shouldn't have done because some of those cars were pretty high tech.
But we're talking Jim.
Exactly.
He's the man. He can drive anything.
Exactly.
I remember him when I was over at Murray's once, and I was saying, "Oh, what's Jim up to?" And he says, "Oh, he's just been running at Monaco. They were running those." I think they were the new McLarens. I think they were the centre seat McLaren things. It was either them or the M1 BMW, something like that. And I said, "Oh, how did he go?" He says, "Oh, he got third or something or other." He said, talking to Jim said, well, he could have raced it if he had a race like them. He said, they were expensive cars, and he said, you should have seen it, Murray. He said, they were just smashing the things up. He said, I couldn't do that.
Yes.
And if you've noticed, Jim never hit anybody.
No,
Jim,
that's right.
which is what I loved about him, you know.
Yeah.
He would run his race, and he didn't biff or bash to get past.
Right.
He did it by skill.
Yeah, he did.
You know?
Yeah,
And I tried to copy him like that, because for a start, I couldn't afford to biff and bash. But I love the cars. I didn't want to see him smashed up. You know?
Exactly. That's
So I've probably lost races because of that, but I didn't have the ego. It didn't matter, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you ran this for what, a couple of seasons, I guess?
I ran it
in
till
the red and yellow?
84.
Till 84.
Yeah.
And so you repainted it, fitted the bigger back wing and everything.
Yeah.
And then you
That
had
was 79.
oh, was it 79?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And so then you had a new project that you were working on for the sports sedan category. Which was going to be something pretty special, but that sort of got outlawed before you were allowed to even race it, wasn't it?
Yeah, I decided I got to know enough by then, and I'm looking at all the new space frame things that they're doing and all the rest of it, and thought I wouldn't mind doing that, you know, and sort of building a car that would be part of the New Zealand history, you know. So I looked around, and I'd fallen in love with those De Tomaso Panteras, you know.
Yes.
And so I went and talked to Murray about it and said, you know, and he says, well, it was a toss-up between they were going to do.
Oh, yeah.
Or the Falcon.
Okay.
But Ford New Zealand came along and says, here's a body.
Yep.
You know,
of course.
So the problem was the rules back then said you had to have the steel centre section, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
And of course I couldn't afford to do that. Panteras were through the roof. And so I went to the AGM and said to the guys, look, I want to build a new car for sports sedans, you know, but the rules aren't quite right. And they said, oh, why is that? And I said, well, in the rules it says you've got to have the steel centre section. I said, imagine buying a Pantera. I want to run a Pantera. And they're like, wow, you know. And I said, And I said, but imagine, and then cutting the front and back off and space frame, you know. And I said, you know what? We've got a minimum weight rule. I said, so what does it matter whether it's made out of ping pong balls, foam, plastic, lead? Well, it doesn't matter. It's got to come up to weight. And everybody agreed, except for Graham Mattis. He wasn't too happy about it. And so they changed the rule, and I was allowed to build that then, you know. So I started building, and actually, in fact,
and
these are all the parts for it there.
So this is
started
the
building. There's the body, which has already been modified. There's the original shape of the Pantera, and I put the big box because I was going to have the radiators in there for cooling.
You think of the car that Kevin Bartlett raced in Australia, we could have had our own.
That came out 8 or 9 months after I started
Did it
building
really?
that.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, I never made a secret of it. So they probably did it on their own. Who knows? You know? But anyway, and then Graham broke his gearbox in his Charger, and I get a phone call from him, and I didn't really know him very well. And he's like, I ordered the parts from the States, you know, and they won't be here till 3 weeks, and it's in 2 weeks' time. We've got the North-South clash, and I'm like, you know, and he's like, I need to borrow yours, and I'm like, and of course, because I'd bought the ex-Pedersen M18 McLaren,
right?
Because that's what you used to do in those days.
Exactly.
You know, all McLarens uprights and all the wheels and the DG300 transaxle, you know, and I paid a fortune for it, you know, and here it is sitting because it was all mocked up on I've got the jig here that Murray built the Falcon on, you know, and so I've got that there, and the body's all mocked up on it, and I'm making the cage in the middle of it, and I've mocked up the engine there with a bell housing I made to adapt for the DG300 to the Cleveland, you know, because I was just going to run the engine out of this in it. And anyway, but in the meantime, Mann's got hold of the sports stand deal again, and they went, no, there's no sports cars in the class. They've got to be for the saloon cars that were 4-seaters. And so basically, that was the end of it. So that's when I built that Trans Am Mustang, the blue one I got, and that was a project that Tony Rutherford had started, and he just got so far and stopped, you know, and Tony was good. He let me pay it off actually. So I bought that off him, and what I did, was because it was just barely bits, you know, and I had to make all the body mounts to mount the body on it. We had to wire it, put a gearbox in it, and make up the exhaust system. And all I did was, by then I'd got a pretty cooking engine in the Cobra, Falcon Cobra that I run. So I pulled that out and dropped that in, and got it all going like that. You know?
So basically, this was retired because of the Di Tommaso project. So
that's the only reason.
That was going to be your car. Because I guess you wanted something, because this, I guess people associated this with Jim Richards, and you wanted to build your own car and sort of go your own direction.
But as well, I'm watching, because, you know, I was an avid reader of all this. I've got to get the magazines each month come in, and you see all the stuff that's being built overseas. I think at the time there was the Kaditcha was being built by Aussie guy, and I'm like, what? And I'm just like, oh yeah. And so in my Pantera, I was going to have the, you know, the Venturis underneath for ground effects, and you know, I was going to really get into it. And so, and new cars were coming out, you know. I mean, PDL2 had come out by that stage, and it was quick. So you needed a faster weapon.
And a proper tube frame car. So the Mustang was retired, but of course you held on to it, which is a cool thing, you know, and have just kept it all.
It was either a cool thing or a silly thing. The trouble is, I'm a loyal sort of a person, and I still had the HR, and I still had all the other stuff, you know. I probably should have done what everybody else done, just had 1 or 2 cars and concentrated on that, but in the end I ended up with 30.
Right.
Because I just love the things, you know, and I thought, what can I get next, you know. Bit silly really, but it was fun. I had a hell of fun, you know. So, and it didn't, like I said, I didn't have the ego for the thing, so it didn't matter. Although later on we built the little pre-65 Mustang, and I cleaned up there in 2 seasons in a row. And that's when it was actually a man's championship. And then I went to build I always liked running things that were different, and they started to, there was more Mustangs coming into it, and I was like, And so I built the Mercury Comet, you know, because I always liked those 427s. Let's build one of those, you know. So, and that was quite a learning experience, you know. I tried to do the same as I did with my Cobra, whereas she stroked the crank, and I did that with a 390 crank for the Cyclone. I stroked it to 427, but it was weak and it broke.
I see.
Broke one, and then we caught, and I was worried about some other things happened with the heads, and so I did it again, but kept an eye on it, and I had those System 1 oil filters in it, and after we did about 7 laps practice, I pulled the System 1 off, had a look, and here's bits in the filter. Pulled it back home, and there was 3 cracks in the crank. It was ready to go. So then I had to, I was always trying to remember, I got all these cars. I had that many cars and that much money. So I'm always trying. So I ended up having to buy the steel crank for it and all the rest of it.
Okay, got it. I mean, you have an amazing collection. And at what point did you decide? So you, because it's not like you've been sitting on your chuff for the last 40 years since this car retired. So you've been racing actively, and then at some point you decided that you'd get the Sidchrome back out.
I wasn't really ready for it, but everybody started hassling. You got to get that Sidchrome out, you know, and there's the Scope series and and all the rest of it. And I was like, and I thought, I suppose I better, you know. So but it was huge. It was 2 years worth of restoration. To do it properly.
It's a phenomenal job, though, isn't it?
Thank you very much. It had to be done, though. I mean, at the end of the day, we're just custodians of all these cars, you know, and it's our job to look after them, you know, and I'm the man who's in control of the thing, so I have to do it, you know. I guess it's a bit about integrity with me too. That's important to me. I like to do the right thing.
Yes, exactly. So, it's phenomenal to see. And I mean, just standing here next to it, I never got to see this car race in period when Jim Richards raced it. Because I was too young. I got to see you race it, and it left a lasting impression on me, because by that stage, this must have been 1981 or something, I guess. By this stage, everyone had switched to small body cars, so they're sticking V8s and Capris and things like that.
So I think that was about 84.
Oh, was it? And so
I took it to Manfield.
That'd be right. Yes, and so it was neat to see a proper muscle car still being raced. I think John Osborne still had that the ex Rod Coppins Camaro. But most people had switched to the small body cars, the Ford Capri with a V8 in it, and then they started going to Mazda RX-7s because they're a bit more slippery. But here was you with a proper muscle car, and so it really left an impression on me. And so it's very exciting for me to come here and see this car in the flesh and just see how nice it is, because of course I mean, she was a pretty tired old car when you went to restore, and you know, it'd been knocked around, and the Aussies sort of play for keeps. So you know, you had a lot of repair work to do from its
Funny
time
old
on
Jim's
sale?
the same.
Yeah,
Because when I started to rebuild it, we had the 75th year of the Auckland Car Club.
Yep.
And they'd hassled me to become one of the executive committee. And
Yeah.
I said, I'm not ready for this yet. Whether I hang my helmet up, no, we need you. And so I said, well, if you give me a job, and they came up with a job. So, yeah, all right. So I got on that. And so I was on the organising committee and everything for that for the 75th. So we had it at the Alexandra Racecourse.
Oh, yeah.
And we got Jim Richards to come over and
wow.
have a speech and everything, So I go up to the bar to get some drinks and rum and cokes and stuff. And Jim comes up, and I turn and he sees me and he says, oh, George, he says, how's the old girl? He always asks,
Cool.
I said, funny you should ask, Jim. I said, I'm actually restoring it, I'll have it all together. I said, so tell me, once it's all together, do you want to have a skid, He says, hell yeah. He says, don't worry. He says, I'll look after it for you.
Yeah.
I said, stuff that. I want to see you give it a shot. And he laughed, Yeah.
Oh, that is cool. Because he, like a lot of drivers, have no emotional attachment to their old cars. Like Peter Brock was like that.
Oh, yeah.
It was just a tool to do a job. You didn't get rid of it. Alan Moffat was a person who always had an emotional attachment to his
Mustang,
cars.
didn't he?
Yeah, didn't
wow,
just. Yeah, kept it for years. And even
See,
his
those
Capri.
and Jim does too, because they're really car fanatics.
Car people, yes.
They're the car people.
That's right, yeah. And Jim started life as a motor mechanic.
Oh, yeah.
And so he actually kept several of his Group A touring cars that he'd won championships.
I see that,
It doesn't surprise me at all that he still has a lot of fondness for this great car.
Well, Bowden came over here in about 1987, 88,
It's David
something
Bowden.
like that. David Bowden, and collected up 5 cars from here.
That's right, he did, all our early Mustangs, most of our
there
early
was a
Mustangs he'd
GDHO down in South Island that apparently had run at Bathurst. He'd run at Bathurst,
Oh, okay, yeah.
And of course, he comes to see me. He threw one of the local guys, Ross Walker, that in the Mustang Club. And he offered me $100K for it.
Gee,
that was
right?
that was a lot of money back then.
That's all the money, isn't it?
And I'm like, I don't know what to sell, And he's blah blah blah, and we'll do it right. And everything. I said, well, I understand, and I've seen your stuff, and I can appreciate that. And he says, well, and I don't know what to say. And in the end, I said, well, the trouble is, okay, so I'd give you the Sidchrome, and I'd get $100K, which is really good. I said, but the problem is, you'd have the Sidchrome Mustang, and I wouldn't have it anymore. And he thought for a bit, you could see it going. He goes, yeah. He says, but I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back. I said, yeah, that's all right. It was a bit of a laugh.
So the motor is currently out of the car at the moment, isn't it? And you're rebuilding that.
Well, it had been together since 2013. They asked me to do some demo laps at the last round of the supercars at Pukekohe. And I thought, well, okay, I'll do that. And I actually rang up Murray Bunn's wife, because he's passed away, of course. And because I always used to see, she's a lovely lady, and she was sort of left out of it, and I felt a bit sorry for her, So I said, I rang her up and said, look, Liz, we're going to do some practice laps, just some exhibition laps. I said, would you like to go for a ride in the car? And she said, oh yeah. And it was fantastic to see. We go to the track, and all the old cronies, they used to do their stuff, and they all come there, and they couldn't saw her, and the joy you saw in her face. Cool. It was just wonderful to do it just for that. It was great. And went out, and she just loved it. So, but when we went out, of course, it's been sitting for a while, and the brakes were dragging, and it wasn't running right, And in the meantime, So Murray, when I bought the car off him, and with the first rebuild, I did it way back. He said, look, now the ring, I took everything out and showed him. He says, now the heads, he flipped them over. He says, look, see these Cooper rings in here? He says, do not touch them. And what they were sort of...
Should we go and look at let's go and look at those heads,
okay, can do. So here's the Sidchrome heads here, So
these right here are the
original heads,
the original Gurney Westlake heads of the Sidchrome Mustang. Wow.
And anyway, the rings were set in here,
This was Murray Bunn, wasn't it?
Yeah. Now Cooper rings you used them instead of a head gasket, and then it just had your new gaskety thing made up that went around it. And what they were like finely wrapped so they weren't solid, and they squeezed to get, for the sealage.
Right.
And so you couldn't they stuck out like 6 thou or something from the head.
Yeah.
So you couldn't machine it. He said, now don't ever touch those, George.
Yeah.
He says, because they're a bugger of a thing, and just use it as it is.
Yeah.
Now, of course, it had sat for all this time. I don't know where they went, but the gaskets, those special gasket things had gone. And I thought to myself, I wonder if we can you get away with using it like a Felpro gasket,
Yeah.
And I found one that went on the on that part of it,
Yeah.
So we tried that,
Yeah.
and it didn't work.
Okay,
So I had it together and I raced it and I did some races and practice in it after I'd finished building it, and then remember it sat, so then it wasn't running properly, and it got temperature got up a bit too, and I thought, I bet you it's the head gasket. Pulled the heads off, and sure enough it was. Well, actually I pulled the whole in. It's too hard. You can't get the heads off because they're on porcupines, and you can't get them out. So I just pulled the whole thing out, and it had been a while, and I'd done a little bit, and I thought, I'll look at the whole thing anyway, and put it, and it was all beautiful, except for this. You could see where the water had been, so I thought, so I talked to old Glenn Jennett, who's really done a lot with performance V8s nowadays. He's done so much, got him over and had a look, and I said, look, this is what he told me and all the rest of it. Oh, and the other thing was I went to change the spark plugs, and the adapters that were put in, because it's aluminium, and at some stage obviously they'd stripped the thread, so it had this adapter that went in like a sleeve with thread on the outside and thread on the inside for the spark plug. And when I pulled out the spark plug, it stuck to the spark plug, so it had to come apart anyway, And so Glenn replaced these with some special things, and we went from a taper plug to a flat washer plug, so that it's not going to bind itself and pull them out.
Got it. Yeah.
So, and he looked and he says, no, I think what we can do, he says, I've got a good engineer, we can do that, and we'll put in steel rings instead, and we'll just leave them maybe just a thou taller, so that it gets extra clamping with the gaskets, because the problem is with these heads, you can only clamp them down to 80 foot-pounds. Murray said, do not go any more than that, because they were known for cracking if you pulled them down too. And of course the modern things, like my Cleveland things, I'm pulling them down to 120 foot-pounds. And so so he's redone them now, and they're ready to go. But I just have to assemble them all up and
tell us about the machining work that's been done here and how that's come about.
So you would have heard of David Vizard. So he was over here for a lecture, and I wanted to go to it, but I couldn't afford it. I didn't have the time really. And I'd sold a set of 426 Hemi. I got to 30 cars, and then I'm getting older, and I'm thinking, I'm not going to, I need 2 more lifetimes to finish all these projects. I better start. So I got rid of the Chrysler, because I was quite disappointed with the 426. They only flowed as good as my Mercury Comet heads. And these are the 426 Hemi heads that are supposed to be the deal. And the Boss heads flew 200 horsepower more in stock, So I was like, and so I'd advertised them. The guy bought them. And he says, can I leave them with you? I'm coming up sometime in a few months. And no worries. So I get a phone call that weekend of that deal that David Vizard was here. And I'll get the phone call from me. We're coming up for that Vizard. I said, I'd like to go on to that. He said, So he comes up, and they go to that on the Friday night, I think. And then Saturday morning, he comes to my place early in the morning. There's 4 of them that come up from, I can't remember, Hastings or something like that. And I said, so you finally made it? Yeah. We came up for the Vizard thing. I'm like, I wanted to go. He says, really? I said, yeah. He said, well, would you like to meet him? I said, what do you mean? He says, well, this guy here pit crewed for him in the States, and all the rest of it. And that's how it all got jacked up. We've just dropped him to the hotel out by the airport, and he's there for 8 hours before he flies out. He'd love to see all this.
Wow.
Do you want to see him? I said, well, if you want.
Yes.
So he stuff off, and next minute I've got David Vizard here. Well, he comes in and he sees the Sidchrome, and I had it over in the garage over here, and he looks at the case, wow, what is that? And I tell him what it is, and then he says, did you build it for me? And he opens the door and he hops in, and basically he sat there the whole time we chatted. And anyway, I got him in the workshop here in the engine room to look at my Cleveland heads, And I showed him the Cleveland heads, because I'd ported them myself, you know. And I said, is there anything else I could do? He says, yeah. He says, and have you got my new book? I said, yeah, I have actually. He says, well, page blah blah. He said, here on the Cleveland heads, they sort of stand straight up and down and come back like that, the edge here. And you see these are leaned over. He said, so he says, you've got to treat the airflow in an engine, you treat the charge as if it's water, okay? So you imagine the water coming in through the port, coming through the valve, and it goes and it hits this thing. Well, what does it do when it hits this? It just goes like this. And the problem is, of course, when it goes like this, you lose that, because the best way to fill a cylinder is the swirl effect, right? So if you can keep that swirl going, it sucks more, and you get, because the more petrol and oxygen, the bigger the bang. And he said, you need to do that. You know, so I did that to the heads on the Cobra, because I had it was getting rebuilt for the next season.
This is your
production.
We should mention this is your Falcon XC Cobra, one of 400 made.
Number 211. And so I did that to it, put it in the car, and I dropped nearly a second a lap. And it was like crisper. You could feel it, you know, and I'm like, whoa. So when I had pulled this down, hello, it's got the square, and I'd forgotten, you know. And so one of the things before I gave it to Glenn to do it, I laid all the edges over and all the rest of this, so that should make a little bit of a difference for it as well.
This is I love this little office of yours here. I'm just gonna scan around here. So this is the Mustang.
That was the first meeting after I repainted it.
Isn't that neat?
Now that was funny.
Model cars, slot car here, and go ahead.
So when Bay Park, you used to have the pits. You had that long line of pit shelters, and we used to grid up behind that.
That's right.
Now what they did there, we'd push the cars out onto the grid for the start of the race. You know?
It's like a parade.
That's right. So this particular day, this is the first time I had it. There was all new and shiny and everything, you know. And so we start pushing it out, and the cars in front of us are going out, and then as soon as it got into view of the crowd, there was this big ooh from the crowd, and we knew by then we got the thumbs up for the paint job.
Oh, that's really cool. I love it in here, like the slot cars and things. There's like a little miniature of Mustang.
That's right. Well, I did that for when we were mucking around with the slot cars. I bought the Sidchrome.
I've got and there's more over here. This is, and some pretty neat books. More cars. Your race cars up here. Pre-65 Mustang.
That's the one.
There's your Fox body Trans Am Mustang. There's the Camaro that's sitting out in the shed right now. There's the Mercury Comet. There's the Mustang in your livery. And
that was the Falcon racing there. That's the first. See, you had to do 2 club circuit races before you were allowed on the Grand Prix circuit. And that was the first meeting I ran it on the Grand Prix.
I see. Isn't that cool? I've got this here's pretty exciting, though, isn't it?
The cross boss intake.
You've got some neat stuff.
68 Ford won the Trans Am series, and they wanted to win it again. So they looked at the rules, and the rules said, okay, you have to run a single 4-barrel carburetor.
That's right.
And so they're okay. So the problem with the normal single 4-barrel is you have 4 long runners, and then you have 4 short runners. And on a race engine, everything needs to be the same, you know. And so they looked at it and they thought, let's put all the barrels of the 4-barrel in a line, and then we can have the runners going like that. And also, being a little car, a 302 with less torque, the way to get more torque is you have long runners. So the ports on this side actually start over here on the inside the intake, and they got long runners out of it as well. And so they built them. They were running them to 9,300 to make those heads work, because they were huge. They were too big, actually, you know. And so they built 2 carburetor sizes, and this is the smallest one, and this is an 850 CFM. Now, anybody who's mucked around with a muscle car and they put a different cam in it, an intake manifold and that, they're probably going to have at least, like on a Cleveland or a 350 Chev, you're going to have 750 to 850 CFM carburetor to make it go, right? You know, and so the smallest one was 850 CFM, but this is the bigger one, okay? So they made them in 2 sizes. And this one is unbelievably 1425 CFM.
Wow.
The next size up is a bucket and a funnel.
Exactly.
So they take it out, and they did one race or couple or something or other, and it blitzed everybody, and the SCCA came along with their rubber stamp. Sorry, boys, it's illegal. And so then they contracted Holly, because they knew they needed a bigger carburetor, and so they contracted Holly to build the Dominators.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah. So this is a pretty neat thing. And of course, technically, and this was how Ford sort of went about racing, you know, in the late 60s and into 1970. It was look at the rule book, do whatever we can, spend as much money as we need to. And money was just no object in racing at that time. And so, yeah, like you say, I think it was in 1970, because for 69, they were running a pair of 4-barrel
Dominators, I think.
Dominators, that's right. Massive carbs.
Yeah.
And for 70...
Yeah, because they knew they worked. Now, most people know of the normal carburetor, which is, okay, here. Right, see this?
Yeah.
Here's your normal, that one's an 850.
Right.
Yeah, okay. And then, of course, you've got the ones that Ford got them to build. A Dominator, okay? So that's a 1050 of that one, okay?
Yeah.
Look at the difference in size, you know?
Yeah.
So that's how the Dominator came about, through Ford and the racing,
And they were running a couple of 1050s in 1969.
I'd hate to think what the fuel consumption
Oh,
was,
I know,
you know? Yeah.
And so for 1970, the SCCA made a new rule, said single 4-barrel. And so this is what they came up with, and it's pretty phenomenal, isn't it? But of course, there was...
Well, it wasn't a new rule. The rule was there all along for it to being a single 4-barrel. Ford just wanted to win it again, so they looked at the rules to see how they could make their cars better.
Yeah.
And of course, I bought a 69 Bosch 302 because I love them.
Yeah.
And that's one of my projects. And of course, I just love all this factory race stuff, and that, so I had to have one. I won't tell you how much it cost me. It was a fortune. But look at it.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
you know.
Exactly.
They made different tops. You could have 2 of the 850s on there.
Wow.
Yeah. They did them where they had you could put a normal 4-barrel on, and other carburetors as well. Of course, they did Webers and things as well. But no, of course, nobody knows about these. I wanted to have it on my road car so that when what's in there, and you lift it up and people go,
yes,
you know?
exactly right. No, this is really cool. Love this place. It's a really neat space.
Yeah, that's a Weber one for a Cleveland. Actually, I had another project I was going to. Well, those are IDFs. Actually, I've also got IDAs. I set on a Hall Pantera manifold for my Pantera that I was going to do for that. But so they're currently both on Marketplace at the moment because I'm running out of time. I'm just running out of time. You know, I mean, that young fella, he's going to do some of it, and Brittany, she wants. They won't pick their own cars and that they're going to keep for them, you know. But you know, you can't live in a dream, you know. I mean, I haven't run for a little while, and I ran George's Trans Am about, I don't know, 2 years ago on a practice day. His Mangusta, and I was right on the times as I've always been, you know. But so I can still do it, you know, but the body's starting to get a bit buggered. My knees are buggered from being an electrician, and of course, to get all this, I used to do home jobs after work. You know, I'd make as much money as doing a home job as I would in the week, you know. To eventually 9 years after I started my apprenticeship, I left Rankins and formed my own business, and I was away from there, which was good because I was able to claim advertising through the business as well.
Exactly.
So I got back GST and I got back tax, and it all helped.
Oh, that's so. Anyway, George, we'll wrap this up here. We've been talking for a wee while now, and it's like, thanks so much for allowing us to come by and film this amazing car and hear about your stories, which to me are just completely fascinating. And like I say, this is one of my childhood dream cars, and it's actually important to point out that this is a genuine 1969 Boss 302. So this is actually a really desirable car, even before it became a race car.
Well, they only built 1,650, I think it was, 69s. The next year, 70, they built 4,700.
Yes.
So being a collector and of, you know, and knowing all the stuff, I've always tried to get the most collectible stuff. And it starts out, when anybody that knows about the muscle car dealers, it's the lowest number of cars built, and it starts off as big block 4-speed cars, and of course how many were built, and then the one after that is a big block automatic car in low numbers. Then it goes after that to the small block cars and how many numbers were built, and manuals of course are always worth more than the autos.
That's it.
And then so I tried to make my collection you know.
Yeah.
And I'm a Ford guy, but
Yes.
well, you see the Camaro here. I bought that in Pomona from some Mexicans at Pomona Swap Meet. It was all painted in satin black, and they had $1,200 on it. And I looked at it, and I thought, Jesus, this is a Z28. And they draw. I just handed them the cash. I didn't even haggle, you know, because I got to the point where I had all these Fords, and I went to buy something else, and I was like, well, I've already got that, and I got that, you know, and I always liked the look of the Z cars, you know.
Car,
So yes, I bought that, and then I bought a Dodge Challenger, and I had a Cuda, and you know. But I got to say, out of them all, the easiest to work on and the easiest to get power out of with the Fords, there's no doubt about it. You know? The Cleveland heads, man, they just outflow everything. My Cobra, it's on. We have a little desktop dyno. You feed all the information on, and it spits out the horsepower and torque figures, and it's about 645 horsepower from a stock block engine. You know, we've had to build, you know, strengthen the block up on that. But and it's bloody potent, you know. So you couldn't get it out of the. You have to get aftermarket heads for those. You know. Even the best of them, the 292s and the 461s. They didn't flow anything like the Cobra's heads, you know. Anyway, it's all been fun, you know.
Yeah, that's good.
But
isn't it?
you know, it is now time to start thinking of passing stuff on to other people, because you know, I'm 69 now, and okay, the mind's still there and all the rest of it, but the body's getting a bit decrepit, you know. I can still do things, but you have to be realistic, you know. And I've had my time and had the fun of it. The kids both race, so and they love the collections and that, so they'll get some of them, you know. But
isn't that cool? I'm glad the car went to the right person back then in 1977, and you were the right owner for it. And a lot of these cars just didn't survive. You know, there's nothing less desirable than an old race car. You know,
it probably should have gone to someone with the big ego that needed to put all the dollars in it to really go good.
But
you know?
who knows what might have happened to it? Maybe tube framed it. Maybe they changed it beyond recognition.
Sure. They would have done that. They wouldn't have had any of compunction of leaving it how it was.
Exactly.
You know?
It went to the right owner, and you raced it and enjoyed it as an enthusiast more than probably as a racer, and then you put it away, you brought it back out when the time was right and restored it, and mate, it's a credit to you. So thanks so much, George, for having us come by and check out your amazing collection and see this really historic and special car.
Great stuff, Steve.
Anyway, folks, that's it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed this little video. If you did, please hit the like button and the subscribe button, and tap that little bell thingy so you get a notification when I post up a new vid. And be sure to share. That's what I make these things for. Anyway, until next time, we will catch you then. See ya.